Western New York Regional Education Center for Economic Development presents Target Success. Bringing together leaders in business, industry, and education for worker training and community progress. Established in 1983, the Western New York Regional Education Center for Economic Development has been designated by the State Education Department to coordinate employment and training programs across New York. The Western New York Center serves Erie, Niagara, Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, and Allegheny counties. And now, here's the host of Target Success, Gerald Wolfgang.
Welcome to Target Success. Our weekly cable television program brings together leaders from the fields of business, education, economic development, and government. Today we have with us Paul Gromosiak. Paul is a local historian and author and has attachment to a place called the Niagara Experience Center. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
We're really glad to have you, and here really I want to start the program in talking about the history of the greater Niagara area, and I'm really talking with an expert who has written 8 books about the falls and about the history of this area. And I'd really like to know a little more about it for our listening audience. Before the program, you mentioned some great historical points, certainly the fort in the upper river.
Of course, we have the jewel right now, which is Old Fort Niagara. I can't say enough about how well run that facility is, but it would be nice to have more facilities similar to that, extending along the Niagara River all the way to Buffalo for that matter. And we do have places where interesting events took place in the past, such as the construction of the very first ship to sail the upper Great Lakes. That was built in LaSalle, called the Griffin.
It was built by LaSalle, wasn't it?
It was built by the explorer LaSalle, in LaSalle. And how do you think what was the village of LaSalle got its name? From the man who's known throughout the world. That man made his reputation throughout the world. Well, he built the very first ship to sail the upper lakes here.
And then we come down the river toward, actually, I would call the portage area, since I grew up on Portage Road in Niagara Falls, and we had another facility guarding the portage.
Yes, you had Fort Schlosser, which was built by the British in 1760. Before them, you had the French fort, and then a part of that fort, both forts that still exist today, is the old stone chimney, which you can see near the daily exit of the boulevard there, the parkway, I should say. And that was attached to a structure which housed British soldiers, French soldiers, and which became a very important part of our history. And that fort protected the portage, the important link between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie.
Now, if we go down to the other end, to what would be now Art Park, we had another facility there.
Yes, you had Fort Jonquière, or a small trading post built there by Chabert Jonquière, and it protected the lower landing of the portage. And of course, before the French and British were here, the Native Americans too used the portage. That's who started that great portage, the Native American people.
So we really had, before the white man came here, we had really Indian, I want to say, areas in the upper river and in the lower river.
Yes.
And that in developing that portage, then certainly the white man, or certainly the traders, developed that with putting outposts there, first for just trading with the Indians, and then forts to protect the area.
Yes. Don't forget, water was the major way of travel years ago. You didn't have highways, you didn't have vehicles except for simple wagons, and so you always had to find the easiest water route to go from one place to another. And of course, the Niagara River was a great way to go from the upper Lake Ontario to Lake Erie, but you had the problem with the falls and the gorge. And so you had to portage, as the French would say. You had to get your boats and canoes and climb up Lewiston Hill or the Niagara Escarpment, and then go to the upper and then vice versa from the upper river down to Lewiston. But it was worthwhile doing it, because then you got back on Lake Erie, and then you could take the rivers down south. You could go to Lake Huron and the other Great Lakes. So it was a wonderful way to go from east to west.
So we had then part of the Iroquois Confederacy. This was the trading, really one of the top trading areas then, I would believe.
Indeed. It was the way to the west. And the Seneca Nation were the people who protected it for the Six Nations, as they call themselves today. And so this was the place where the decision was made who controlled North America. Because if you controlled this river, you controlled movement to the west, and from the west to the east.
Well, we've given everyone certainly a little bit of a historical lesson, with a lot more certainly to come today. Should this be an economic asset?
Oh, without a doubt. Because I've spoken to tens of thousands of visitors to the falls through the years, and they want to know what makes us stand out from the rest of the world. And our history is what makes us stand out.
Now, we have pictures certainly of the French looking at the falls for the first time. That was, what, in the 1600s, I believe?
1678 is when Father Louis Hennepin is supposed to have come to see the falls in December of that year.
And now we've heard that that might have been certainly a great stop for him, but there were earlier visits, certainly, of French and traders that got here.
Yes.
We just might not have.
One that we are almost certain was here before Father Hennepin was Etienne Brulé, a French trader. But he didn't write about what he experienced over here, whereas Hennepin did.
Okay. How can we really use this asset as an economic and tourism tool to bring more people here and really to provide more business activity?
Well, what we need is a facility, a place where our visitors can go to become excited about our history. And not just an ordinary museum, a center, a place where they can go and their appetite for interest in our history can be whetted enough so that they'll want to leave that facility and visit historical sites throughout the Western New York region, especially Niagara County, around the falls. And so I'm working with the state and other people, local people, on this project to establish the Niagara Experience Center in downtown Niagara Falls.
What is the Niagara Experience Center?
Well, it will be the building itself will hopefully be an attraction, a destination for people. It will stand out itself. And then when people go into this building, they will experience all the different aspects of history here. The natural history, the Native American, the French and British colonial history, early American, the War of 1812, the Civil War, the Free Niagara movement, the Underground Railroad, industry, hydroelectric power, all those things. And then we will tell them where they can go in Western New York to see some aspects of these parts of our history.
So this particular, let's say, facility, which is not up yet, and I know you've been working hard on developing a concept, a plan, and New York State now, I guess it would be USA Niagara,
Yes.
Which is the development agency that the governor has put in Niagara Falls. Mm-hmm. They've agreed to develop this
Yes.
in conjunction with who?
Well, right now we have put together a interim board of directors, and I'm honored to be on that board. And we are in the process now of interviewing consultants who will come up with ideas for how the building should be designed, outside and inside. And sometime this year we're going to have a design charrette to which these people will come, and each one will try to convince us that they are the ones we should work with to come up with a design for the facility. So this design charrette will take a few days. It's not open to the public because it's very much involved, and we just won't have time right now. But it's going to be a very, very serious discussion of how this building should be done. And we will, of course, consult with other historians. I'm certainly not the only person qualified to offer opinions on this.
Now, this facility will be built somewhere within the Niagara area.
Yes, it will be built someplace in Niagara Falls, New York, downtown, fairly close to the park by the falls.
How large a facility are we talking about?
Well, I really can't say now because we are, the size of the facility will depend on the site itself, and we have narrowed down we have narrowed our interest to 4 sites now, and some are larger than others, and so these consultants will have to address that. So I personally would like to see the building really stand out from the other buildings downtown, especially in future development. If we want visitors to go there first, it should be something that will catch the eye and be, like I said, very attractive itself. So they'll be curious and want to go in and see what's there. And from that building, they can go to everything else, because they'll talk about what else there is in the downtown Niagara Falls and all over Western New York.
So we can tell our listening audience that planning, it has been started. It's developing. We are using historical consultants to help you and your board and your team to develop this plan, and we're very conscious of the historical stars within the area.
That's right, and there are many. One in Niagara Falls, New York in particular, that I'm very interested in is Augustus Porter's house. Augustus and Peter Porter, you might as well say, are the two people who founded the village of Niagara Falls, which later became the city of Niagara Falls. And Augustus built the very first house by the falls, the first house in what is now the city of Niagara Falls, a beautiful Georgian mansion right by the American Rapids. And it was torn down early in the 20th century because no one wanted to spend the money to preserve it. Well, I would like to see it rebuilt, a replica of it rebuilt on the original site, which is now an empty lot, and made into a museum of the history of famous people who have visited Western New York, especially the Falls. And the list is endless. From kings and queens, famous writers, athletes, movie stars, you name it, they've been here. And some of the stories that some of these people have to say are so special and unique, they could be told in that house. And so there people could see what kind of home people built by this river, and at the same time learn a lot about the people who came here. The brick used to make that house was made with clay from Lewiston. The wood, all the wood in the house, most of the wood in the house was made from the oak trees in the forest around the house. So it was really a representation of this region.
That certainly would be a unique facility to bring tourists here and at least give them something to see. Old Fort Niagara has, over the years, been redeveloped. In fact, now they're building, or not building, they're redoing one of the warehouses into a hands-on experience center, information center. Don't you think that that's the type of activity we need to develop within the region?
Without a doubt. Every place that we develop should use the latest in technology, because our audiences today are very sophisticated, especially the young people. Even this replica of Augustus Porter's house could have all kinds of interactive displays inside, especially for the young, where they could experience history by making some changes, whatever they can do with computer graphics. And this is what we need to do. Every site should be brought to life. When I taught school, I always believed that what you teach you should try to bring it to life, make it really relevant to people. And history especially should be done that way. And we can do it here.
Now, events probably at the fort are probably held every weekend with soldiers from different eras, whether it's the Civil War or whether it's the Revolutionary War, or just, I want to say, campouts where they bring in people who will live like they did in colonial days and be able to show our young people and our families that type of life. What would you think of some events attached to the Niagara Experience Center?
Definitely, and I think that when we develop historical sites more, hopefully in the future along the river, similar things could be done, so as not to overlap though. Every site should be unique from the others in some way, so that we don't become redundant on reenactments. I certainly would want to take away from visitation to Old Fort Niagara.
But maybe like at the porterhouse,
right,
cooking
yes,
from that age.
How were the holidays celebrated? In the in the winter holidays, how was the 4th of July celebrated in the beginning of this great nation? And there's so many things we could do to show what life was like here along the Niagara frontier and the Niagara River. And every site could do something different. Now, the site where the Griffin was built, you could show what life was like here at that time. You could have a visitor center there where people could go inside and see what that place looked like when the ship was built and the hazards they had to deal with.
Wouldn't it be nice to have a replica of that right there?
Build a replica. Another thing I'd like to see are replicas of some of the ships that sailed the upper Niagara River and the lower Niagara River, built and let people get on them and use them. For example, in 1837 there was a rebellion in Canada. There were some men and women who wanted to make the Republic of Canada and get rid of the British Crown forever. And so they set up their shop, their nation on Navy Island. And there were a lot of Americans sympathetic to the cause at the time, and an American ship called the Caroline from Buffalo was supplying the rebels on Navy Island. Well, the British and Canadians, of course, were not too happy with that. So they snuck over one night and set fire to the ship and sent it to the falls to go over. But it didn't make it over. It stopped in the rocks just above the falls and burnt to the waterline. Well, wouldn't it be neat to make a replica of that ship? It was a steamship. And let people ride on it and go around Navy Island, or even Grand Island for that matter, and hear some of these legends of the Upper River. The stories of the serpents that people said they saw in the Upper River years ago. All kinds of neat stories could be told on the ship. And then down at Lewiston, why not have a replica of a French and a British sailing ship from the 18th century? And let them ride up to Fort Niagara and back to Lewiston.
What would happen, we've talked about certainly some of the other historic areas. You mentioned the Underground Railroad, and that certainly now there's a tour and there's some activity in developing that, and that would certainly be a great certainly events and history to bring out and have some type of facility to show that. What about also the Senecas? It would seem to me that it would be logical, now that we have the Seneca Niagara Casino, that we develop some type of Seneca museum or Seneca trading post, something that would show the history of the Senecas, who were the first people here.
Well, what I would like to see is a facility set up away from the city, preferably someplace like Joe Davis State Park. And there's a beautiful forest there with 2 ponds. And if you go in there, and I've been there many times to walk, you feel like you're away from everything, all civilization, you're back in time. Well, why not build a replica of a Native American village, an ancient village, by those ponds, and show what life was like before the arrival of the white man? The language, the culture, how they made their canoes, how they made their longhouses.
That would be marvelous, really.
Yes.
That would be a tremendous
Because
tourism.
I've been to many historical sites like that all over the world, especially here in the United States, Sturbridge, Plymouth, Williamsburg, and they are very attractive to people. And people are interested in the Native American history.
That would be, that would really be great. Now, we know that tourists would be attractive, but also as part of the education process, you've mentioned your background as a teacher, as I have had experience certainly as a teacher in the schools. This would be a great educational addition for our students in our schools in Western New York.
And it would also, very importantly, bring pride back to this place that we're living in. And let's face it, a lot of people are unhappy with the way things are presently. And by knowing what a great place this has been, we could build upon that for the future and give our young people an identity. Say, we really stand out from the rest of the world. We really are a special place. Some things have gone wrong, but maybe now we can fix it all.
Well, you also mentioned power, and you mentioned electrical, chemical, that started here, and quote manufacturing, certainly in the chemical industry, but manufacturing in general. We know that we've slipped by over the years of being a manufacturing center, but history did start it here. Wouldn't it be nice? I believe Tulsa started the
Tesla. Nikola Tesla was responsible for the practical application of alternating current on a large scale. And the first facility to take advantage of that was built in Niagara Falls, the Dynamis power plant. Not built in the gorge, but above the falls. And all that's left of that place is the transformer house, a beautiful stone building on Buffalo Avenue. I'd like to see that made into a museum celebrating that very history.
Now, we lit the certainly the world event that took place in Buffalo. The power came from here to do that.
The PanAmerican Exposition. And I don't know how many local people know, but that was the only time in the history of the two communities, Buffalo and Niagara Falls, that they really cooperated seriously in a joint venture that benefited both communities economically and socially.
And that was our first regional activity.
Yes, and hopefully we can have many more in the future.
Those are significant historical events that could be certainly developed beyond the Niagara Experience Center then. Within the package for the center, this reach out, this breakout into a map of all these areas.
It will be a hub. The center will be a hub. Just imagine a hub and then spokes going out in all directions from it. And then I envision a people mover system, taking people who don't have a personal transportation or don't want to pay taxi fare to go to Buffalo, to go to Lockport, to go to Youngstown, to go to these different places to see what we have to offer.
Because we didn't mention the Erie Canal, and that reminds me of Lockport. Certainly that's another historical entrance to the west coming from our friends in Albany across the state. It would seem to me we have so many places here to show off.
And instead of 3 to 4 hours, our visitors will be spending a couple of days at least. And economically, that's going to really help us.
That would really be certainly a great benefit. What can the public do to assist this project and the Niagara Experience Center?
Well, first of all, I wish people would contact all the elected officials, George Maziarz, Francine Del Monte, Byron Brown, and even the governor, Pataki. Of course, he is responsible for getting this thing going recently. And if they want to talk to me, they're welcome to call me. I don't have email, but you can call me at 297-3570 anytime you want to and talk. And if you have ideas that you want to offer, maybe we can't use them right now, but we can use them in the future. And I'm sure we're going to be calling upon other leaders in Western New York to offer ideas in the future on how this facility should be done. So,
well, we certainly want the public to be involved, and I'd encourage them to certainly contact you, which got me to a different tangent. Marilyn Monroe, Franchette Tone, certainly other movie stars over the years, Joe DiMaggio,
Superman.
We have sports figures like Sal Magley and numerous stars. We can go to Niagara University for Calvin Murphy. So historically, even within the sports or movies or theater, we have an artist. We have certainly many outstanding people to recognize if we had the place to do it.
You could have a building just about the movies and the music that had mentioned Niagara Falls or portrayed Niagara Falls in some way throughout the years. There have been dozens and dozens and dozens of them, mentions of Niagara Falls. And so we are noted so well, and it would be nice to show all these different aspects of our heritage. And you want to make sure that the visit that people get is worth their money. We don't want to take advantage of them. We want them to leave saying to their friends and neighbors, go there because I got my money's worth.
Who was Franchette Tone?
He was an actor, a famous actor from Niagara Falls, and on Buffalo Avenue.
And his family was from here.
From Niagara Falls. Yeah.
I remember reading about him, and certainly I don't remember seeing him.
Their house is gone now. It used to be on Buffalo Avenue.
Is that correct? But that's a very famous family that dates back to...
before my time and your time.
but some of the families that started Niagara Falls.
That's right. That's right. His father was a businessman, local businessman, and we had a lot of people. The man who founded the Alcoa Aluminum Company, his house on Buffalo Avenue had an aluminum roof. The only house in Niagara Falls that ever had an aluminum shingles.
That was started in Niagara Falls.
Yes.
You know, those certainly are facts that I think our listening audience, I'm sure, would like to explore and see, and tours of historical buildings. We didn't mention shredded wheat.
Mr. Perky, Henry Perky, didn't call it a factory, he called it a palace. And it was. It was a worker's palace. Nothing like that was ever built before, and maybe not since either, I don't think. It looked more like a fancy hotel than a factory. You walked into the lobby and it was like a 4-star hotel. My mother worked there when she was a young girl packing biscuits. He was the first man, from what I understand, to give his workers a coffee break.
We went to the, as 6th graders, we walked from our school and went to the cafe, well, took a tour of how they made shredded wheat, and then were given I want to say breakfast, lunch, whatever, in their cafeteria.
For years and years and years, after the falls, it was the second most visited destination here. that factory. Tourists went there all the time to get that free shredded wheat with the fruit of the season on it.
Last but not least is certainly Bell Aerosystems and the invention of the helicopter, the jet, whatever, at Bell Aerosystems.
Well, we have the Niagara Aerospace Museum, which is an excellent facility, and they certainly deserve a lot of credit for what they've done. And I advise everyone in the region who hasn't been there yet to go there and see it, and you'll walk away with a lot of pride in Western New York.
So we've sort of started with our history with the Senecas and brought it up to date, certainly up through modern industry. Niagara has a lot to be thankful for in its historical background, and it's something we should celebrate and use as an economic tool.
Definitely. We are extremely unique from the rest of the world in so many ways. This place, I often say, was a tug-of-war between great nations, whether they were Native American or European, for control of North America, this great, great continent that we're living on. And so many firsts took place here. This was the birthplace of many industries, many ideas. And so we have a great story to tell the world, and in telling it, we can help ourselves economically, socially, emotionally, and spiritually.
Well, I want to thank you, Paul, for coming to join us. One last question would be about the future. What do you see our area, even beyond the historical presence we've talked about today?
Well, I'm an optimist. And in Niagara Falls, sometimes it's difficult to say you're an optimist. But I think better days are coming, and I really think that the state, the federal governments, especially in the person of Senator Schumer, who has recently helped out with getting the National Park Service involved in efforts here, I think better days are coming, and I think people who live here will say to themselves someday, wow, what a special place we live in. Why didn't we do this before?
Well, that would certainly be exceptional, and we look forward to those days. We've always been optimistic about our area. I would like to see more of our young people staying here and giving them a chance to experience careers. And certainly if the historical economic presence develops, they would have careers in many different fields that they could choose.
Right.
Last but not least, I would think you'd be working very closely with the Experience Center, with our universities and colleges. Niagara County Community College, certainly Niagara University, and certainly the University of Buffalo.
Definitely, and I'm hoping that they will be very much involved in this process from the beginning to the end and thereafter, because they have so much to offer us. And I think the students going there, if they're not from Western New York, will understand what a special place this is.
I want to thank you again for being here, Paul. We really appreciate you telling us about the Niagara Experience Center. Look forward to you coming back when we might have a final plan we can show people. And
oh, I'd love to do that.
Okay. I want to thank our listening audience for tuning in again to hear the outstanding exploits and ventures of our guest today, Paul Gromosiak, and our local historian, and we thank him very much for coming and look forward to seeing you again on Target Success.
For further information, questions, or suggestions for future programs, contact Gerald Wolfgang at 821-7185 or by email at jwolfgang@e1b.org.